The poor you will always have with you. Now, those are not my words. Those are the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, who came to the world that amongst other things, we might become rich. So again, those are not my words. According to official data, 9 to 10% of the entire world population live in extreme poverty. Think about it. Over 800 million people on planet Earth live in extreme poverty. Now, according to the World Bank, extreme poverty is defined as living below $2.15 a day. So anyone who lives on less than $2.15 a day is considered to be in extreme poverty. Now, of course, I have my own question about such a figure and such a definition. Because, for example, $2.15 in the United States of America is very different from $2.15 in Uganda. If we convert $2.15 in Uganda, with that amount of money, I can very comfortably feed 4 people a day, very comfortably, without any complaints. They're all satisfied. They're living very happily on a good diet. I once traveled to a particular country, and over here in Uganda, there's a cluster of bananas, which I would buy at maybe, 25, 30 cents. I found the same cluster of bananas at about $6. So these huge variations in terms of the value of food and other things can mean a lot. And also, I know a very huge percentage of people in my country, Uganda, who earn around $50 a month. $50 a month, and they live comfortably. They're nothing close to what you would define as extreme poverty. They feed themselves. Once they get sick, they can get treated. They eat every day. They have breakfast, they'll have lunch, they'll have supper, and they are very comfortable. So again, this is very difficult to define, but that doesn't take anything away from the fact that the poor we shall always have with us. So what's the definition of poverty? So despite whichever definition of poverty we might have in the world, there's a lot of poor people. Very many poor people on earth. And why? Why is it that poor people exist? They have always existed. And very many years later, poor people will always exist. They'll even exist in the future. Now, there are 2 main categories of reasons. Number 1, reasons which are out of control of the poor people themselves, whoever it is. Imagine I was poor. There are reasons that could be beyond me being poor. And then there are reasons which are 100% in control of the poor people. So we shall start with the reasons that are out of the control of the poor people. War and conflict. This is something that an everyday person might not be able to control. Of course, the people in authority might be able to control war and conflict, but the everyday person caught down here at the bottom will certainly not be able to control whether their country goes into war and conflict or not. So during wars and conflict, infrastructure is destroyed. So I can imagine I had my business running maybe in the cities or places like that. A lot of it is going to be wiped out. My source of money is going to be destroyed. People will flee from their jobs. They'll flee because what's more important than life? I won't stay and try to work when my life is in danger. I will run away and try to go to a safe place. So the whole environment created around war and conflict makes it in such a way that it's very difficult for people to become comfortable and actually run businesses. An example is a country like Syria. Over the past 10 years, its entire middle class has been wiped out. And 80% of the people in Syria actually live below the poverty line. That's such a huge percentage, all because of war. Before the war and the conflict, everything was steady, everything was okay, and a huge percentage was not considered to be, poor. Another country which is quite close to my country is the Democratic Republic of Congo. Over in the DRC, the place is so unstable, very, very unstable. Because my country is so close to the DRC, I occasionally get clients who want to buy product from me, maybe eggs, maybe the old chicks, to take over to their country. But I personally cannot deliver over there. I cannot even, the farthest I can go is close to the border. I can't even consider getting in there because I risk losing my property, whatever I go in there. I personally even risk losing my life. I know that, for example, in the DRC, if anyone wants to move over any products or anything that they are selling, a lot of the times the safest place is to move them by air. And that means that everything becomes very pricey, it skyrockets everything, and it simply means that running a business over there is very difficult. So again, that's something that people can't control, but it leads to a lot of poverty. Another cause of hunger is poverty and malnutrition. Now, of course, it's well known that if you're broke, if you have no money, you're going to go hungry. It's also very true that if you're hungry and broke, you're going to become poor, because someone who is hungry and has no food cannot think, they cannot reason, they can't even get the energy to work. When the only thing you're thinking about is survival, when you can't have the energy to work, your body is malnourished, you have no nutrients. You know, there is data that shows that the first 1,000 days of someone's life, a baby's life, are very important. They are so important in someone's development. If during your first 1,000 days you don't have food, you're malnourished, it affects both your physical development and your mental development, the way your brain develops. So someone who grows in absolute hunger will not have the proper mental capacity to actually out-reason other people and out-compete them and be able to make money. And so that person is likely to end up poor. Now, of course, this same reason rolls into things like places with poor health care, because if a place has poor health care, people over there are going to get sick. You know, if you're sick and you're consistently sick and you can't seek proper medication to get your body all right, you're not going to be able to get the energy to actually work and make money. If the sanitation in your area is poor, the water is poor, and you're consistently getting sick, it's going to be leading to the same results. You won't be able to have a strong body because you're consistently straining your resources in order to simply be able to treat yourself, and you can't get anything else done to actually be able to get yourself out of poverty. Another one is education. Education is called the great equalizer. Yeah, the great equalizer. Now, of course, not everyone who has had no education will end up poor. But on average, education is such an important factor in people getting out of poverty because it equalizes everything. A lot of times, if someone is trying to hire and they want employees, they look at the level of education. And it's simply the level of education that they will use as a qualification. So it doesn't matter what your background was, whether you are poor or you are rich. If you have a particular level of education, you can qualify for that job. So that's why it's called the great equalizer. You know, people from the poorest and the richest neighborhoods and backgrounds can all get to a level where they can earn the same amount of money. So education, despite the fact that maybe too much education at some point might not be as helpful or might not be proportional to the amount of money you earn, basic education is so important and it equalizes society and gets people out of poverty. So these are some of the factors that I believe are out of the control of the poor people. But also, there's factors that are directly controlled by the people themselves who end up in poverty. Number one, lack of a desire to work, and number two, lack of a genuine desire to distinguish yourself from others. Now, of course, in a population where there is not a lot of competition and there is a lot of opportunities, anyone who has even the most little of desire to work will end up with money because they're going to get a job and they'll end up with some form of work that can actually get them paid and bring in money. So if you're living in such a place, if you're living in such a country and you end up poor, it's because you don't want to work. You see, currently we are living in a generation where a lot of kids, a lot of people actually feel very entitled. And I understand it's so common. I've seen it in so many places. People feel very entitled. When I was growing up, I had a lot of friends who would come to school and they're telling you stories and they'll be like, our car, our house, we have a very nice car. And when I was growing up, I grew up to learn and understand that I have nothing of myself. When I'm young, despite the fact that my father might have a car or my father might have a house, what they have is theirs. They worked for it, they earned it. They also started with nothing, and that is theirs, yeah? And it's nothing to do with me. And I believe that's one of the things that got me from a very young level into the mentality of you actually need to work in order to be able to earn the things that belong to you. The things that belong to your father are your father's and they're not yours. But in this day and generation, a lot of people are actually very entitled. If my father has land, it is my land. Come on, it's not your land. If your father has a vehicle, it is your vehicle. It's not your vehicle. So if you grow up with such a mentality that you feel entitled, a lot of these people don't actually desire to work at all. They think they'll just sit down, maybe play games, watch TV, and they'll have things come to them. And at some point, reality is actually going to strike. When reality strikes, they actually notice that they have nothing in this world. Everything that they thought they had didn't belong to them. Maybe their father passes on and then they notice that there was actually a different heir. Or maybe, the family takes everything and then all of a sudden they have nothing because they're not working, there's no money coming into the family or, into their pockets. So the desire to work is actually one of those things that gets people out of poverty. But the second thing is that you could be in a population where there's a lot of competition, yeah? So there is work, Or maybe there is completely no work, and in order for you to be able to earn, you actually have to come up with different ideas. You need to come up with very brilliant ideas that will enable you to earn. In my country, for example, in Uganda, you might not have the best employment opportunities for a lot of people, but you actually have to be able to use your brain, think about the bracket, and come up with ways in which you can actually create job opportunities for yourself. Just like I was able to start up a poultry farm, just like I'm able to start up a YouTube channel, which actually gets me paid and get myself out of poverty. So in a population where there's a lot of competition, there is a need that whoever lives there actually needs to think outside the bracket. You need to get very creative. You need to be able to think of how to solve solutions in a place where there's a lot of demand. Maybe there's too many people who are trying to look for a very few group of jobs. So it's very important that you have a genuine desire to distinguish yourself in order to be able to get out of poverty. So if you've liked this video, I think you'll enjoy this video right here where I talk about how to get rich in Africa. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Catch you very soon with another video. Bye-bye.